Well, good afternoon and Happy New Year 2021. This is our first community update. We'll try to be doing these every couple of weeks. I hope that you've all gotten to enjoy the holiday season as it was different for all of us as we had to gather, hopefully in smaller groups. And as we enter the new year, I think it's important to note, COVID wasn't just in 2020, it is with us in 2021, and quite frankly, probably will continue until we get enough vaccines out, and I'll touch on that subject in just a few minutes. But here's a couple of updates on COVID and vaccines. The total number of COVID cases in Akron is 8,620, and 869 people have been hospitalized, and tragically, 76 people have lost their lives to this virus. Summit County is still listed as a level 3 state on the risk level map, meaning there's still very high exposure and spread of COVID-19 in our communities due to community spread, and we've not been unaffected here. A significant number of city employees have contracted that and all come back, thankfully, not quite yet, but it is out there in and around our communities, which predicated all of the safety measures we've been trying to do since the middle of March of last year. But now's not really the time to let up on any of these things. I think the single most important thing, and I'll touch on in a minute, is the vaccine and its distribution and getting us back to what was pre-March. And I don't want to use the word normal because I think we still have to stay vigilant and diligent and continue to follow these health guidelines until those health experts tell us, that now is a time to be able to not do those things. But if you feel sick, don't go out. Call your healthcare provider. Wear a mask. Try to stay up to 6 feet. The end of this is in sight. I mean, it's around the corner. I think we've made great progress as a state in being able to do that. Its prevalence is everywhere, and you'll see that in the numbers of people that have been affected, the number of people who've gotten into the hospital. We've tried to protect hospitals from not being overrun with patients. And quite frankly, there were some times in December in talking to all of our health systems that, there's a stress on their system, on their capacity to be able to treat patients, on their capacity to be able to treat patients that are not affected with COVID. There's capacity on not only healthcare workers, but our EMS and ambulance providers and everybody. That just was taxing to the system. And so we tried to take the best advice that they gave us to try to mitigate this as well as we can. It is still there. There's still a lot of people hospitalized. Those numbers have come down, and you can check out Summit County Public Health's website on some of the exact numbers. But which leads us kind of into the vaccine, and there's a lot of talk about the vaccine, and I'll start off by saying that right now there is a supply problem. The state of Ohio, through ODH, they get it from the federal government. The federal government sends it to Ohio. Ohio sends it to the communities through public health. Now they started with 1A, and they're transitioning into 1B. So they were trying to do the frontline workers first, and I know our EMS providers and our firefighters were first in line. We actually advocated for both fire and police, and that was a decision made at the state of Ohio. But we're hoping to get police vaccinated as quickly as possible also. That first round is probably heading back to their second dose soon. We're still trying to go through the ramifications of what that change in policy means. But just this morning, there was an announcement by the federal government that they were going to release more doses of vaccine because they think they have the production capability to be able to catch up to the second dose. And that'll all be explained in a press conference tomorrow by our Summit County Public Health Department and EMA. But what that all means when it comes to the availability of the vaccine, listen, if there was enough of them, I think any one of us as a mayor or county executive or state leader would try to get as many as possible. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to increase that supply to get as many people shots as quickly as possible. And I'm not going to argue with the doctors or the scientists that says, you have to have 2 doses for the best immunity. I agree. And so we're going to follow those guidelines as best we can. When it comes to the vaccine, like I said, you should hear some more things tomorrow from Summit County Public Health about the availability. The governor has, and we talk to him twice a week and have implored him, obviously, and I think he works very hard to get us the number that we need. And sometimes that may change. They're finding out like on a Sunday night that they're going to get a distribution on Tuesday. That's not a whole lot of lead time. So until we can see some really, really big numbers, and I think they're starting with people that are over 80 on that 1B group, and we have some protocols. We have to follow those protocols when it comes to the state guidelines. And some states are doing it a little bit differently, but I think we're following the best data and the best science to be able to get as many doses, as many shots into as many arms as quickly as possible. But it's going to take us some time to do that. And quite frankly, you know, whoever needs to get it, the state will give us those guidelines to be able to do it. And the city is here to help. And I think even city council and all of our elected leaders are trying to pledge as many resources as we can, whether it comes to, you know, having drive-through sites, whether using our community centers for vaccination. All of those plans are coming together, even when it comes to our local pharmacies. And that's all at a state level where they are engaged in getting them doses as much as possible too. So that is the goal, to get as many shots into as many arms as quickly as possible. And we'll continue that until everybody that wants a vaccine it gets one. And I certainly can understand people that says, listen, I'm going to opt out. Okay, that's a personal decision. There's no mandate to be able to do it. We certainly have encouraged as many people as we can, especially within our city personnel, especially in the fire department. I think we had a great success rate to start off, right around 65%. And this is to keep people safe. And like I said, we want to add the police department. I might have said police department first, but our firefighters and EMS workers were first because they were on the front lines. And we want to add police department and communications personnel as quickly as possible. I'm going to transition to one other subject. And I know there's been a lot of talk, even as of last year, and we spend a considerable amount of time on gun violence, and it's not just a mayor's office issue. It is all of us. It is an all of us issue, and you know, we grappled with that news, especially last year when, you know, tragically 6 children were lost to gun violence in the city of Akron, and it's you know, we sit there and talk about trends, and there's really not one blame, but we did see an increase, and we work very closely with our law enforcement community, but it's just not a law enforcement issue. It is a systemic issue about where we've seen neighborhood investments, whether there's been a job opportunity, and whether there's an economic opportunity, and even education. So all of those key pieces, which I think drive better economic opportunity and to drive that gun violence down, it doesn't help when maybe the state or federal government doesn't take seriously those conversations that we have when it comes to the availability of guns. We quickly this year accepted a federal grant to add more officers to our gun violence task force. And, you know, last year was probably one of the most prolific years in taking illegal guns off the streets, a total of 941. You know what, and the question we ask is, you know, what's the number going to be this year? Quite frankly, it's going to be probably close. That was a 25% increase from the year before. It's a step in the right direction, but it's availability of those guns. And when it comes to gun safety, but also the whole aspect of, you know, people feeling like, you know, hey, this is how I get to solve an issue, is use a gun. It's a lot different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. But is it a community issue? So there's, whether it's talking with kids, and I think that's an extremely important thing, is to get back into high schools. I mean, COVID has added another whole layer of pressure onto the community when it comes to access to healthcare, or whether there's those systemic and even racist issues in our community and in the United States that say you don't have the right access, you don't do those things. And we need to change those institutions so we can change those attitudes when it comes to using a gun to settle a dispute. And there's far too many guns available. And this is not the argument of whether people should be legally allowed to have guns. I just want to get guns out of people's hands that shouldn't have them. The Second Amendment is here. It's not an argument about that, but where can we go and have an honest conversation about the availability of guns and whether it's military style hardware that should be available? And I'm not coming down either way on that, but it's having that, I think, that common sense conversation, and not necessarily vilifying either side by saying, well, this person is that, and this person is that. We can have a common sense conversation, and I think come to a common sense solution to reduce gun violence. I don't think anybody wants to say, hey, listen, we want more. That's not the case. I think it's having an adult conversation about what that looks like. And quite frankly, that is something that we have done from day one, is try to improve those opportunities, invest back into neighborhoods so people don't feel like, you know, the city is not here or that we don't care. That's not it at all. It is a community-driven issue of which we'll need, I think, a lot of partners. And it's not only about law enforcement. It is about our courts. It is about prosecutions. It is about those availability. Is it about juvenile justice? It's all of those things, and education. So it takes all of us, I think, to come up with some of those global solutions to be able to reduce gun violence. We saw that increase across every city across the country. with a decent sized urban population. There was nobody that was down. I hate to make a blanket statement like that because there may be some, but we did see an increase in most major cities across the state of Ohio. So know that it's a top issue for me. And I hate when people say, well, where would you rank it? I mean, they're all important. Every one of these issues are important to the community. And quite frankly, they deserve all of our attention, and they do. With all of the efforts and I think resources to be able to change some of those minds. So know that we are working with partners to be able to help solve it, but know that it doesn't get solved in a week. And as we continue to prioritize those things, that gun violence and the use of guns will continue to be at the top of my list. Let me transition to one other one because I think it's as important as anything as what we've seen. I just have a couple of notes, and I know many of you witnessed last week the horrific events at the Capitol, and this was not a protest. This was an armed, incited overthrow or an attempted overthrow of one branch of government by another. And this is not about elections. This is, every one of those, and I've been involved in dozens, and some of the issues and people that I've supported have lost and some have won, but I've always accepted the results. And this was not that. This was a coordinated effort to intimidate and incite people to overturn a legal election. And quite frankly, horrifically, 5 people died, and those people need to be held accountable. Protest is one thing, and there's no comparison to summertime and now. Those protests were protesting, 400 years of systemic inequality and racism across the country, which needs to be addressed. This was not. And everybody knows that it was different, and it was sad to see the Capitol response of not having enough people to be able to do that. And we all watched it in real time. And I stayed in contact with, I have a lot of friends and people that I know that work in the building that were literally, scared to death. And these were people that were going in that wanted to do harm to other people. And it didn't matter about party at that particular time. And those that supported, those are domestic terrorists, and they committed seditious acts, period. I'm confident that our country is stronger than any one person, believe me. I think we've been resting on these ideals of the consent of the governed. And as we do that, we accept elections and the results of those. And when people talk about, well, this person shouldn't have elected or there was fraud, nobody thought so. It was only a group of people that thought that there was fraud, but there was no evidence to present that. So you can't base your entire system on a lie. And this election was legal. There is a legal winner, and we will have a transition come January 20th. And to that end, too, is that we can't just close our eyes and think, that this attempt can go unchecked. I think those that should be held responsible will be. There can't be a precedent set to allow this type of behavior ever again. And together, I think we all have to decide that kind of enough is enough. When you look at that in real time, and I can't think of another event in my lifetime that is seminal besides maybe 9/11, when we looked at an attack on the United States by terrorists. This was somebody fomenting lies that were never true. But frankly, there's a lot of people that believe that, and I think it's our job as an institution of government. People have to feel that we care about their lot in life. And whatever that may be, if that's providing a better opportunity, a safer neighborhood, and that's something that we all have to do, I think, as a government better. But this has nothing compared to that. That was a riot. That was a storming of the Capitol, and that was one branch of government trying to usurp another branch. And the founders feared this based on a lot of different things. But those who perpetrated, those who supported, and those who incited have to be held responsible. And I'm confident enough in the justice system that will happen. But even if you look at some of the after action reports and some of the postings and some of the reports from afterwards, the sheer terror that people put into people's lives and in their hearts because they saw a mob of tens of thousands of people storming towards the Capitol, that's unprecedented, and we can't let that happen again. This isn't a third world country. This isn't a banana republic. We are based on the rule of law. If you have a rightful way to say your grievances, you have a rightful way to get those addressed. Storming the Capitol is not one of them, and I certainly pray and hope that these people will be held accountable. So let's transition to gears a little bit. I think we did a great job with leaf removal this year. We're always playing with the weather, of whether it will snow or not. And quite frankly, we got one of our worst ones of this year. And quite frankly, if it doesn't snow the rest of the year, I'm not unhappy. I know we live at in and a close around the snow belt, and we'll get it at some particular point. But I think the crews did a great job. We got like 47,000 cubic yards of leaves. That's enough to fill First Energy Stadium. Go Browns! I know we're not playing there this time. We're playing the Chiefs, and I hope we beat the Chiefs. But it's enough to fill First Energy Stadium 12 feet deep, and it's a 7,000 cubic yard increase, which is about 18% over last year's volume. We've gone back and forth on leaf removal, and I think it's one of those key city services that people depend upon to get rid of their leaves. And we'll continue to do that. And I know we've invested a lot of people and equipment to be able to do that. So it's a long process, even for me. Some areas of the city produce more leaves than others. But also remind you that you can continue to take service requests online at akronohio.gov/311. And we'll post that also, but I'll read it again. akronohio.gov/311 to the 311 system. That's the Mayor's Action Center. We'll collect those leaves next week if you have a chance to put those out. There's probably not many left. I know there's some. One of the key things too is to get them off the streets. Then they don't wash down the sewer. Then they don't back up sewers, and then they don't get to the water treatment facility. So there's a method to the madness to be able to get that done. It does prevent a lot of maintenance issues down at water reclamation. That doesn't mean leaves don't go down there. They still do, but as many as we can move, it helps the system. Get your request in by January 15th, which is next week, and you'll need to bag any leaves and schedule a special bulk pickup online by calling 311. So if you want to get rid of leaves, put them in a bag, put them on the side, and call 311. It's not difficult, or you can go to the website and make that request also. Just yesterday, or a couple of days ago, we announced that the installation of the rubber worker statue, which will be located in the center of the roundabout on Main Street, has been delayed until the spring. And we ran into a couple of issues when it comes to the shipment of materials. And it's not unprecedented where we were getting some of the materials or where the artist was getting some of the materials. Obviously, COVID has caused a backup on some of those things. And so where we were getting them, and we were running into a time frame where it was going to be a little bit colder. So we said, why don't we just wait till a little bit better weather and hopefully do something down there in person, socially distanced, wearing a mask, to be able to thank all of our community partners and really the community as the dedication of that rubber worker statue goes up. We'll have an outdoor unveiling. I think it's the centerpiece of what is downtown. It'll be well lit. It's right in the middle of the roundabout. All of you that have bought bricks, I end up buying 3, one for my great aunt, one for my father, and one for my aunt, and we all have probably family and relatives that worked either for the rubber companies or a company that supplied materials to the rubber companies. So that is our historic legacy. We're still a strong center for polymer and tire research with both Goodyear and Bridgestone Firestone and a number of other companies, both foreign and domestic here in the United States. So we're still that strong rubber capital, I think. And it's what we're known for, and I think we should embrace it. And I think this rubber worker statue is a dedication to all of that hard efforts that literally a generation of people, if you looked at manufacturing back then, sometimes it wasn't the safest to make some of these materials, and we used materials that nowadays, like asbestos and benzene, that aren't necessarily as widely used. This was a generation of people that went to work to make sure that the next generation had a little bit better. So I think we owe them a debt of gratitude for sacrificing, and also build up what I think is one of the strongest cores of Akron. Was a very strong middle class. It allowed their kids to go to school and go to college and do a lot of other things, but there's still a lot of value to making things. And I think this area has always made things. We've all been very inventive, whether it comes to the machine and tool industry, when it comes to rubber and polymers and tires and all of those things. It's still a strong center for us to do that. And we continue to invest in that as a region, because I think it's still pretty important on the manufacturing side. So we've also announced a deadline to buy that commemorative brick, which will be installed on the northeast corner of the roundabout, has been extended to April 30th. So you still have a couple of months to buy a commemorative brick. If you have not done that, you can go to akronstories.com/bricks. I'll repeat that again. You can go to akronstories.com/bricks to be able to order one of those. Okay. All right, the last, and I installed a couple of these just on Saturday for my mom. I think smoke alarms are extremely important, and as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, your chances of surviving a fire in your home increase dramatically if you have a smoke alarm. And if you're in need of a smoke alarm, we have them free. The Akron Fire Department has them for free. I'm going to repeat that. We have free smoke alarms supplied to us by the Red Cross and ourselves. We put in some of those. You can call the Akron Fire Community Services Bureau at 330-375-2197 to get your alarms. And if you need help installing them, members of the Akron Fire Department are also there to help. I know everybody likes free stuff, and these are free fire alarms, and this is a safety thing. So if you need one, just call, and they'll come out and help put them up as they are available to do that. We'll stay socially distant. We'll wear a mask. These are our fire personnel, and they'll be able to, and they'll tell you firsthand, they don't want to go to fires where there's no smoke alarm. It's probably one of the first things that they look for. They are free. So if you are in need of the one, please contact 375-2197. They save lives. Don't wait. Don't say, well, listen, I'll call next week. I'm busy. Call them today. Maybe it's a couple days before they can get out there. So make sure that you call. I know they'll be happy to come out and help you with those. And if you can install them yourselves, think of an aunt, think of a relative that may need that also. And if you can help out and put a smoke alarm, and there's guidance about where to put them, how far apart. They're quite easy to put up. Even I was able to do it in 15 or 20 minutes and put up a couple of them for my mom. So they're free again. I know I've mentioned that 4 or 5 times, and I know people like free stuff, but take a free smoke alarm. It can save your life. So why don't we move on to some questions, and we'll I'll have Steph ask the questions and we'll go from there.
Okay, so the first question is from Justin, and Justin asks, can you further explain your opposition to Ohio's Stand Your Ground law?
Yeah, and this is something that even as a cohort of cities across the state of Ohio, we always felt that there was ample protection to be able to defend yourself on your own property when it comes to the Castle Doctrine. But this has to do with the use of self-defense in a public place. And quite frankly, we thought it may give rise to armed vigilantism when in that duty to retreat. So, the overall focus of all of our communities is try to make them safer. And this isn't about open carry. This isn't about your right to have a gun. This was about your duty to not retreat. And all of these decisions, they're not made when emotions are not high, when a situation is not tense. It isn't about the self-defense of your home, but it is about a public place. And we've seen statistics both from Florida and other states. I know there are 32 states that have them. And these are the things that we look at when we try to make the community safer. And quite frankly, in trying to protect communities in the use of guns, trying to reduce the homicide rates. And the Stand Your Ground law is linked to a 32% increase in firearm homicides in both justifiable and unlawful homicides. And Florida's law had the largest negative impact on neighborhoods that initially saw a low homicide rate, turning in the safest neighborhoods into maybe an unknown, into a tragedy. And it also gave people the right. A police officer was shot in Florida based on this law also. And it is, to me, it's about community safety and having, I guess, the best sense of going forward. We declared in 2020 that racism is a public health crisis, and the data is really clear. And I've talked about data a lot over the last 5 years. They have a disproportionate effect in communities of color, specifically in the African-American community, to justify a deadly shooting. And so we didn't support it because we don't want to make the community more unsafe, and coming up with common sense solutions to be able to do that. I just didn't feel that Stand Your Ground did that in making the community safe. And I think a lot of us were on the same page on that way, because, urban communities are different than suburban and rural communities. And we have to have, I think, the flexibility to be able to address some of those things to reduce the anxiety, reduce the threat, and reduce the use of guns across the community. And that'll continue to be our focus as long as I'm mayor.
Next question is from Erica, and she asked, are you able to speak to APS about getting our kids back into school buildings?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that we have worked fairly closely. I've worked fairly closely with David James, the superintendent, over the ensuing months about what is the best plan to keep people safe. And as we look at some of that data, I know we saw it very early on that because some school systems went back and then they went to a hybrid and then they've gone back again and then they pulled back out. thankfully, we have pushed the governor to come up with I think a plan, and he came up with one and announced it last week. Is how about if we vaccinate all school personnel? The vaccine was never tested on kids. I think 16 and under. That could be wrong. Could be 18 and under, but I think it was 16 and under. But if we can vaccinate the bus drivers and the administrators and the teachers, wouldn't that give us a safer environment to be able to do that? And I've talked to some school board members, and thankfully last night they voted 7-0 to accept, the government's or the state government's proposition that if you will vaccinate your personnel, you will make a commitment to getting back to at least a hybrid model. So I'm looking forward to seeing that from Superintendent Janes. We haven't seen kindergartners in a year, and I know there's a lot of trepidation, maybe amongst teachers, about whether it's safe enough. I think we can create an environment enough that is safe for both children and teachers and anybody that's in the school. If we follow those guidelines about staying 6 feet apart, maybe putting up the partitions and wearing a mask. We can always make adjustments, because I think the concern was even brought up by Dr. Akbar. A lot of communities live in multi-generational homes. How about if kids bring that back? I think that's a great solution to say, if that's going to be the case, do we reduce class sizes from to half, and some go 2 and some go 3? Do we have enough teachers to be able to do that? Those are all great questions. But how about if we vaccinate inside those homes also, where maybe it's a grandmother or an aunt that may be more susceptible, so the kids don't, we didn't see that spread from kids in other communities when I came back to those households, but I certainly understand the concerns. But I think we can come up with a plan. I think there's a lot of smart people in public health and within our teacher community and with the administration to say, this is a plan going forward. Let's try this and then make adjustments as we need to. And as we get more vaccines out, we can get more people vaccinated. I think we can get people to a safer spot. So I'm certainly supportive of that plan. Hopefully we can get it back in by March 1st. I'm certainly have been supportive, of educational models that may try something different. And this has been a hard year, not only for kids, but for teachers and administrators and the state and the community as a whole. I think a back in school plan is a ray of sunshine for not only kids, but for also dedicated teachers and everybody that's involved in education. So I look forward to seeing that plan. I guess a very short answer to your question is yes, we've been speaking to them. I'm happy to report that it is moving forward so we can get kids back in, and hopefully with at least a hybrid model, and make some of those adjustments. But great question, and I'm glad you asked it.
Okay, next is from Dustin. Dustin asks, will you do any other live updates this year and take questions from residents live?
Absolutely. We'll probably go back and forth. When we do a live town hall and take questions from residents, we're really limited to one social media platform. When we do tape something and try to take a broad range of questions, listen, you can always ask the mayor's office questions. It's not like you can only ask them every other Monday and we may get back to you. You can always send us those questions either via social or via email. And that's mayor@akronohio.gov. If you have questions, we will always have somebody get back to you. And if we have not, let us know with the follow-up so I can get those answers. I'm a big believer in answering as many questions as possible and in being as transparent as possible. Short answer, short question. Yeah, we're going to do a live one at some particular point, maybe the next one or the one after that. But we'll want to be able to hit, I think, all of the platforms to be able to get and hit some of those bigger topics. But you may have something, excuse me, a little bit more specific to talk about. And so you can always send us those questions. They're not limited to every other Monday when we do a community update.
Okay, Nicole asks, why is it that the city was able to find grant money for the Main Street project, but can't find any to help Akron residents with the massive sewer bill we are getting stuck with?
That's a great question. Quite frankly, and the hard truth is that there was money out there on those to do things like Main Street. There was never any money put aside to help with the EPA's consent decree. And to go back a little bit, we did get some money at some particular point, like in 2006 or 5, to build Rack 14, which is that storage basin off Cauga Street, just north of Euler a little bit. Other than that, it was entirely self-funded. And this is something that has affected 770 communities across the country when they have these consent decree and when they mandate these things. It's like paying your taxes. On April 15th or whatever day the government says your taxes have to be due, you can file for an extension, but you're not going to get around them. And it's the same thing with this mandate. They declare that you have to do this by this certain time, and the only way to be able to do that was to raise water rates to be able to pay for it. We've consistently sought, any sort of monies we can to be able to help offset that project, even with some of the bills. And if you contact Akron Cares, we can help with that end of it too. We've been able to save about $180 million, and I think that's a little bit rough. Maybe it's closer to 150. $150 million over the ensuing 4 years by going back with both modifications to the consent decree and saying, listen, you had us do this, can we do this? And thankfully the court has agreed with our proposal and helped reduce it's lowered our borrowing costs, it's stretched out the payments, and quite frankly, it's reduced the cost of the project. But the initial numbers of whether it was going to come in over or under $1 billion, and that is significant to a community like Akron, and with no federal government help. But this has been going on since 1992 or 93, when the APA, when as an engineering department as a city, they first started working on that. They just didn't make any money available to be able to do it. But we're always looking for new opportunities to be able to find different ways. Lowering the borrowing costs significantly on the interest rate has helped a lot. Coming up with new proposals that we can still clean up the river. And by the way, the river in 1969 was caught fire. And just last year it was declared River of the Year. And I think that's underappreciated by some, that we cleaned up the river to I think an amazing way for the tens of millions of dollars, if not more, that we've invested into the Chicago River to make it clean. When you have a national park, a Summit County Metro Parks, and the watershed up in and around Geauga County that we do protect, have spent a lot of money to be able to do that. You can't get that overnight. Removing those CSOs from that treatment in doing that has been a significant effort, but you're right, it's not uncostly to be able to do it. But we'll continue to look for money-saving ways so we can reduce that burden to Akron residents.
Okay, now our last question comes from John. He said, I thought I saw a couple months ago that the Main Street project was done, and now I'm seeing that the road is shut down again. What's going on with Main Street, and when will it be finished?
Well, it was always phase 1 and phase 2. Akron was one of only, I think, 20 communities across the country that were able to receive 2 different grants on 2 different phases. So we got the first monies, to go back to the one question, the federal grant to do about the federal building going south all the way to Cedar. And then just kind of on a whim, they announced another round. And so we had another section going north, obviously to MLK, to do that part of Main Street too. So that section is closed, hopefully till only the end of May. And then obviously the south section is open and has been open for a little while. But the first section, I think we learned a lot on when it comes to doing that, when it comes to the traffic. Quite frankly, they've got to go down and dig underneath, and there's a little less utility work on this end, so hopefully we'll be able to do it a little bit quicker. It is closed till about, if we get better weather, it could be before the end of May. I hate to make promises like that and not be able to deliver, but we're looking at the end of May for the south end to be able to do it. But assisting those businesses, I think, has been one of our most important things, especially downtown, as we can't gather yet, but hopefully we get to a certain point. We're offering free 2-hour parking vouchers for people who are visiting Chameleon Cafe, Rubber City Hair, Stray Dog, Temio's, as well as Bronstein Tailors and Clothiers. Vouchers can be scanned at the High Market or City Center parking decks. And finally, our Downtown Akron partnership and the Akronite app is offering bonus rewards if you're using those businesses or patronizing them, which you hope you will. And you earn an extra 5% back in blimps, which you can go ahead and spend at another business. So we're always trying to find different ways to be able to help those businesses. But we need to obviously be able to get people to gather again. And that is in Lock 3, that is in the baseball stadium, that is in the Civic Theater, all those wonderful, I think, gathering places where we go to concerts or go to shows or go to ball games. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to some point and have some of that programming this year. And starting with, obviously, when the weather breaks, but it's going to be dependent on how many vaccines we get out there, of which, like I said in the very beginning, I think that's one of the most important things that we're doing now, public health wise, is to hopefully increase that supply and that capacity wise, so we have an infrastructure to get shots into arms for those that want the vaccine. So that'll be it for today. I appreciate you taking the time to be able to listen. I know there were some strong comments about a lot of things, and these are the feelings that I have. I've spent, a career in public service based on what I think is we should be doing the right thing. And when elections have results. We accept them, whether it's good or bad. I know there's people that feel disaffected out there, like their voice doesn't matter. That's something back on us that I think we need to do a better job. But rioting and storming the Capitol and threatening people's lives and horrifically 5 people dying, that's not a protest. That's a coup attempt. And so hopefully those that incited and those that participated will be held accountable. And like I said before, I think our Justice Department is going through those routes and going to hold people accountable now. So stay on the lookout for more announcements around the vaccine and when you can get it. Stay tuned to Public Health. Make sure you wash your hands. Stay 6 feet. Wear a mask out in public and hopefully stay safe. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. God bless. Take care, Akron.